The kind you've ignored your whole life. The kind sitting in jars, drawers, cup holders, and old coffee cans across America right now. And today, I'm going to tell you why the 2006 D-Mint Mark Thomas Jefferson nickel has become one of the most shocking modern coin stories collectors aged 30 to 70 are quietly chasing. Most people think all valuable coins are old. Colonial. Silver. Something their grandfather locked in a safe. That belief has cost people life-changing money. Because history doesn't always whisper. Sometimes it hides in plain sight. Minted in Denver in 2006, slipping through millions of hands unnoticed. Back in 2006, the U.S. Mint was coming off a massive design experiment. Jefferson Nickels had just gone through the Westward Journey series. Designs were changing. Dies were being pushed hard. Production was fast, pressure was high, and quality control wasn't perfect. That's when strange things started happening. Coins that should never have existed began quietly escaping into circulation. A nickel is a nickel. 5 cents. Toss it in the tray. But years later, collectors started seeing patterns. Tiny anomalies. Details that didn't match. Coins that felt wrong in the hand, but looked normal at first glance. And then the auction records began to surface. 2006 D. Jefferson nickel stunned collectors when it sold for a price normally reserved for gold rarities. Suddenly, the conversation changed. People stopped asking, why would a modern nickel be valuable? And started asking, how many more are out there? This is where it gets personal. I remember a collector telling me he almost spent his gas station change. Late night coffee run. He noticed something fell off and slipped it into his pocket instead of the till. Years later, that decision changed everything. That moment turned pocket change into possibility. That's why this story matters. Now let me slow this down, because this is where most people miss the $1 million. The 2006 D-Mint mark means it was struck in Denver. That alone isn't rare. Millions were made. But a tiny fraction were struck with extraordinary errors and die anomalies that transformed them into unicorns of modern numismatics. The first thing to look for is strike quality. This coin should have a sharp portrait of Thomas Jefferson. But the valuable versions often show extreme doubling or distortion in unexpected places. Look closely at Jefferson's eye, cheek, and jawline. If the features look slightly doubled or melted, that's not wear. That's a clue. Next, turn the coin over. Monticello should appear crisp and balanced. On the rare examples, the steps are either unnaturally sharp or strangely incomplete in a way that doesn't match circulation wear. Count the steps. Full steps with abnormal spacing is a major red flag for rarity. Now check the mint mark itself. The D-Mint mark should be clean and well-defined. On the most valuable versions, the D appears doubled, tilted, or oddly shaped, as if it didn't belong there. That's because some of these nickels were struck with misaligned dies. The kind of mistake that almost never escapes the mint. Here's where the story gets darker and more mysterious. Some of the highest value 2006 D nickels show wrong planchet errors. That means the coin was struck on metal it was never supposed to touch. Different weight. Different sound when dropped. Slightly different color under strong light. This is the kind of error that turns a 5-cent coin into a 6- or 7-figure conversation. Collectors who discovered these didn't believe it at first. They thought it was damage or a trick until professional grading confirmed it. When the certification labels came back, jaws dropped. Because now it wasn't a theory. It was real. Imagine holding something worth $1 million and not knowing it for years. That's the emotional punch of modern coin collecting. You don't need a time machine. You don't need a treasure map. You just need awareness and patience. Every 1 to 2 minutes. Let me reset your attention with a hard truth. People are still spending these. Right now, while you're listening, while someone else is driving home, while a cashier scoops change into a register. History is repeating itself quietly, and if you want to identify this coin properly, you must weigh it. A standard Jefferson nickel should weigh exactly 5 grams. Anything noticeably heavier or lighter deserves immediate attention. Use a digital scale. This is not optional if you're serious. Then examine the edges. Nickels should have smooth edges with no reading. But rare errors sometimes show unusual thickness or irregular edge flow. That's metal behaving badly under pressure, and collectors love that. Lighting matters. Use a strong LED light. Tilt the coin slowly. Watch how the surfaces reflect. Error coins often show unnatural flow lines or strange texture patterns that look almost liquid when the light moves. Do not clean the coin. Ever. Cleaning can destroy value instantly. What looks like dirt could be historied. Here's the inspirational part nobody tells you. Most million-dollar finds don't come from experts. They come from ordinary people who paid attention. Truck drivers, retirees, cashiers, people who refuse to assume it's just a nickel. That mindset shift is worth more than money. And yes, the phrase $1,000,000 isn't hype here. Verified examples tied to extreme errors, pristine condition, and professional grading have pushed values into territory most people would never expect from modern pocket change. $1,000,000 is no longer fantasy in this story. It's precedent. A coin made in your lifetime. A coin you've probably held. A coin your kids might have played with. Capable of rewriting someone's future. So tonight, when you get home, don't rush past that drawer. Don't ignore that jar. Don't underestimate the ordinary. Because history doesn't announce itself. It waits. And sometimes, it waits in Denver steel, stamped with a small D, daring you to look closer. But possibly sitting right now in a coffee can, a desk drawer, or a jar of loose change you haven't touched in years. Most people would walk right past it. Some already have. And that's what makes this story so unsettling. Because this is not a fantasy coin. This is a real 2002 D mint Mark Thomas Jefferson nickel. A coin that millions of Americans have held in their hands without ever realizing what they were touching. And for a small number of people, this ordinary-looking nickel quietly crossed the invisible line between spare change and life-changing money. Let me take you back for a moment. It's the early 2000s. The U.S. Mint is producing massive quantities of Jefferson nickels in Denver. The presses are running fast. Too fast. And when that happens, mistakes slip through. Not obvious mistakes. Not cartoonish errors. Subtle ones. The kind only a trained eye or a very lucky collector would ever notice. And that's where the mystery begins. Here's the first thing you need to understand. A 2002 D Jefferson nickel in normal condition is worth face value. 5 cents. That's it. But a specific group of these coins, struck under very particular circumstances, were never meant to leave the mint the way they did. They carry flaws that should have been caught. They weren't. And once they entered circulation, the clock started ticking. Picture this. A retired machinist in the Midwest, sorting through rolls of nickels one quiet evening. He wasn't looking for riches. He was looking for peace. A habit he'd had since childhood. And then his fingers froze. Something felt wrong. Or maybe right. The coin didn't look dramatic. But it felt different. The details were sharper in some places and strangely distorted in others. He put it aside. That decision changed his life. What makes this coin special is not one single feature. It's a combination. And that combination is rare enough to send serious collectors into bidding wars that climb into 7 figures. $1,000,000 is not a phrase thrown around lightly in numismatics. But this coin earned it. Now listen closely, because this is where you learn how to identify it. Start with the obverse, the front of the coin. Thomas Jefferson's portrait should immediately catch your attention. On the rare version, Jefferson's eye appears unusually sharp, almost too sharp, while other facial details seem slightly doubled or misaligned. This is not wear. This is not damage. This is a die error. Look at the date. 2002. On the valuable examples, the numbers show subtle doubling, especially noticeable on the 2 and the 0. It's not screaming at you. It whispers. You may need a magnifying glass. That's normal. If you can see it clearly with the naked eye, you're probably looking at the wrong thing. Now check the mint mark. The D mint mark should be present, but here's the key. On high-value specimens, the D appears slightly tilted or malformed. Not missing. Not bold. Just wrong enough to raise suspicion. That's your clue. Turn the coin over. Monticello should look familiar, but again, something feels off. The steps leading up to Monticello are critical. On most nickels, they're weak or blended together. On the rare 2002 D $1,000,000 nickel, the steps are unusually strong, yet inconsistent. Some steps are razor sharp. Others fade abruptly. This tells experts the coin was struck from a die that was failing in a very specific way. Now pause. Take a breath. This is where people miss it. Weight matters. A genuine example often weighs slightly more or less than standard tolerance due to planchet irregularities. You won't notice this by feel alone. A digital scale is essential. We're talking fractions of a gram. But in this world, fractions of a gram can mean the difference between 5 cents and $1 million. Every 1 to 2 minutes in this story, there's a reminder. Most valuable coins are not loud. They don't announce themselves. They hide behind familiarity. That's why this nickel survived circulation. That's why it's still out there. Collectors who've studied this coin describe an emotional moment when they realized what they had. Heart pounding, hands shaking, doubt creeping in. Because hope is dangerous. But then confirmation comes. Authentication, slabs, auction listings. And suddenly, the word $1 million stops being a dream and starts being paperwork. Because rarity is not just about numbers. It's about stories. It's about mistakes that weren't supposed to happen. It's about holding a piece of history that slipped through the cracks. And serious collectors don't collect metal. They collect moments like that. Another attention reset. Look again at your change. Most people think valuable coins are old. Centuries old. That belief is what keeps this nickel hidden. Modern coins can be just as valuable when the conditions are right. And the 2002 Jefferson nickel is proof that if you think you found one, don't clean it. Ever. Cleaning destroys value instantly. Handle it by the edges. Place it in a protective holder. Then seek a reputable grading service. Not a pawn shop. Not a friend of a friend. Professional authentication is the only path forward. Even if you're wrong, you lose nothing. Even if you're right, you gain everything. Imagine telling your family that a nickel paid off the house. Imagine explaining that a coin most people ignore turned into college funds, retirement, freedom. That's why this story matters. Not because everyone will find one, but because someone will. And it could be you. Collectors in their 30s remember these coins when they were new. Collectors in their 70s remember Jefferson Nickels stretching back decades. This coin connects generations. It reminds us that value isn't always obvious, and opportunity doesn't always knock loudly. The next time you see a nickel, don't rush. Look, really look, because the difference between ordinary and extraordinary is often microscopic. A regular-looking 2000 Thomas Jefferson nickel, the same kind millions of Americans spent on coffee, gas, and vending machines without a second thought. This isn't a fantasy. This is one of the most shocking modern coin stories ever told. And once you hear it, you'll never look at your pocket change the same way again. Most people believe valuable coins are old, worn, and impossible to find. They think you'd need to travel back 100 years or inherit a collection from a long-lost relative. That belief has cost everyday Americans life-changing money. Because the truth is, some of the most valuable coins ever discovered came from modern circulation. Coins that looked boring. Coins that felt ordinary. Coins that slipped through people's fingers for face value, even though they were secretly worth more than most homes. The year 2000 was a strange moment in American history. The country was buzzing with Y2K fears, technology was exploding, and the U.S. Mint was producing massive quantities of coins to keep up with demand. Philadelphia alone struck hundreds of millions of Jefferson nickels that year. Most of them were perfectly normal. But buried in that mountain of metal, a tiny number of coins were born different. Something went wrong. Or depending on how you see it, something went incredibly right. Here's the part that gives collectors chills. The most valuable 2000 Jefferson nickels are not valuable because of age. They're valuable because of mistakes. Errors so subtle that only a trained eye notices them at first glance. Yet so dramatic that once confirmed, they can launch a coin into the $1 million category. These mistakes were never meant to leave the mint. But they did. And once they entered circulation, they vanished into the everyday economy, hiding in drawers, jars, and forgotten collections. Picture a mint worker inspecting dies late at night. A hub slightly misaligned. A press running just a little too long. Metal flowing where it shouldn't. One tiny flaw during production can turn a 5-cent coin into a once-in-a-lifetime treasure. That's exactly what happened with certain 2000 Jefferson nickels. One of the most powerful varieties to look for is a dramatic double-die obverse. This isn't the weak doubling you see from machine vibration. This is bold, unmistakable doubling created during the die-making process itself. On the most valuable examples, Thomas Jefferson's eye, nose, and profile appear doubled, almost like a shadow version of his face slightly offset. The word liberty shows clear separation, not blur. The date 2000 appears thick, with doubled edges you can feel with a fingernail. These are the kinds of coins professional graders stop breathing over. Another jaw-dropping variety involves an off-metal or wrong planchet error. A small number of 2000p Jefferson nickels were struck on planchets intended for other denominations or even foreign coins. Imagine weighing your nickel and realizing it's too light or too heavy. Imagine the color looking just a bit wrong. These errors are extremely rare, and when authenticated, they enter a world where $1,000,000 is no longer a dream number. It becomes a serious conversation. Then there's the full-step phenomenon. Most Jefferson nickels suffer from weak strikes, especially on Monticello's steps on the reverse. The steps blur together. Details vanish. But a perfectly struck 2000p nickel with full, uninterrupted steps is a miracle. Combine that with a pristine condition and a known error, and you've entered elite territory. These are the coins auction houses fight over. These are the coins collectors whisper about at conventions. Now here's where the story turns emotional. These coins weren't locked away by wealthy collectors when they were minted. They were spent. They bought candy. They paid tolls. They sat in ashtrays and glove compartments. Somewhere out there, a kid in the early 2000s bought a soda with a coin that could be worth over $1,000,000 today. Somewhere else, a parent dropped one into a change jar, never realizing it was the most valuable object in the room. This is what makes the hunt so powerful. You don't need permission. You don't need connections. You just need knowledge and patience. Start with the mint mark. Look just to the right of Jefferson's ponytail. You must see a clear P, indicating Philadelphia. No mint mark means it's not the coin we're talking about. Then examine the date closely. Look for thickness, separation, or doubling. Use a magnifying glass. Good lighting matters. Next, study Jefferson's face. Focus on the eye, jawline, and nose. True double dies show separation, not smearing. If it looks like two designs stacked slightly apart, your heart should start racing. Flip the coin over and inspect Monticello. Count the steps. Are they sharp? Are they complete from left to right? Breaks kill value. Perfection multiplies it. Weigh the coin if you can. A standard Jefferson nickel should weigh about 5 grams. If it's significantly off, that's a red flag in the best possible way. Color matters too. Nickels should have a consistent silvery tone. Any strange hue deserves professional attention. This is the moment where most people stop. They doubt themselves. They assume it's impossible. They tell themselves stories about how they'd never be that lucky. And then they put the coin back. Don't do that. Every legendary discovery started with someone who looked twice. Professional grading is critical. Never clean the coin. Never polish it. Never try to improve it. That's how $1,000,000 coins turn into pocket change. Place it in a protective holder and submit it to a top grading service. Authentication is everything in this world. Collectors have learned the hard way that history doesn't announce itself loudly. It whispers. It hides. It waits for someone curious enough to listen. The 2000p Thomas Jefferson nickel is proof that modern coins can change lives. Proof that treasure doesn't always look like treasure. Proof that $1,000,000 can come from the most ordinary places. Think about how many coins pass through your hands every year. Think about the drawers you've never cleaned out, the jars you've ignored, the rolls of nickels sitting untouched because they felt worthless. Somewhere in that metal could be the mistake that rewrites your story. This isn't just about money. It's about possibility. It's about realizing that incredible things can hide in plain sight. That history can be sitting quietly, waiting for the right eyes to notice. And that a 5-cent coin can carry the weight of $1,000,000 and more. Imagine realizing that this quiet little coin, dated 2022 with a tiny P mint mark, could be worth up to $1.7 million. Not someday. Not in theory. Right now. And the scariest part is that most people who've touched this coin already spin it without a second thought. That I want you to picture this for a moment. A late afternoon. Maybe you're cleaning out your car, digging through the cup holder, or sorting loose change into a jar you've been meaning to cash in for years. You pick up a nickel. It feels light, common, forgettable. But what if that exact coin carries a story so rare, so mysterious, that collectors across the country would fight over it for $1,000,000? The 2022p Thomas Jefferson nickel doesn't look special at first glance. That's what makes it dangerous. That's what makes it powerful. Because the most valuable coins in American history rarely announce themselves. They hide in plain sight, passing from hand to hand, gas station to grocery store, while their true value waits patiently for someone who knows what to look for. To understand why this coin matters, you have to understand what happened at the Philadelphia Mint in 2022. That year was chaotic. Staffing changes, increased production pressure, and new dye processes were all happening at once. The mint was pushing out massive quantities of coins to meet demand, and when that happens, mistakes slip through. Not little scratches or wear. We're talking about rare, once-in-a-generation errors that should never have left the building. Somewhere in that rush, a very small number of 2022 P. Jefferson Nickels were struck with anomalies so extreme that seasoned collectors froze when they first saw them. Coins that technically shouldn't exist. Coins that break the rules. And when something breaks the rules of minting, that's when value explodes. Now let me slow this down, because this is where most people miss it. The design itself is familiar. Thomas Jefferson on the front, calm, composed, facing left. Monticello on the back, clean and detailed. But the devil is in the details, and if you don't know where to look, you'll never see it. First, check the mint mark. It must be a P, Philadelphia Mint. No P, no story. This is crucial. Then look closely at Jefferson's eye and jawline. On the rare version, there's doubling so sharp it almost looks like motion. Not blurry, not worn. Crisp, clean doubling that suggests the coin was struck by a misaligned or improperly prepared die. Run your finger gently over the surface. Does it feel unusually smooth in some areas and strangely raised in others? That's another warning sign. Some of these coins show dramatic die clashing, where parts of the reverse design ghost onto the front. That shouldn't happen at this level. But it did. Then turn the coin over. Monticello should be sharp, but on the rare specimens, you'll notice something unsettling. The steps are distorted or doubled. In some cases, parts of the lettering look thicker, almost swollen, as if the metal flowed where it wasn't supposed to. That kind of metal movement tells a story of extreme pressure errors, the kind that make collectors' hearts race. And here's where the mystery deepens that a handful of these nickels were also struck on the wrong planchet. That means the metal itself is wrong. Slightly heavier, slightly off in color. Almost impossible to notice unless you weigh it. A normal Jefferson nickel weighs 5 grams. These don't. They're off just enough to raise alarms. But only if you're paying attention. One collector described finding his while rolling nickels with his grandson. He almost tossed it back into the pile. It was the weight that stopped him. Something felt wrong. Or maybe something felt right. When experts examined similar coins, auction houses went silent. These weren't small finds. These were the kinds of errors that don't show up in everyday collections. The kinds that make headlines quietly, behind closed doors, where serious money moves. That's how a nickel becomes worth $1 million. Now let's talk about why the value climbed so high. It's not just rarity. It's timing. The modern era coin market has exploded. Collectors aged 30 to 70 are realizing that their pocket change years might be over, but the treasures are still out there. And modern errors are the last frontier. They're affordable to find, but priceless when authenticated. A 2022 P. Jefferson nickel with extreme doubling, wrong planchet, and verified mint error characteristics becomes a unicorn. There may be fewer than a dozen known, maybe fewer than 5. No official number exists, and that uncertainty fuels demand. Imagine 2 wealthy collectors locked in a bidding war, both knowing they may never see another example in their lifetime. That's how prices jump from thousands to hundreds of thousands to over $1 million. And the craziest part is this. These coins are not locked away in museums. They weren't recalled. They weren't melted down. They were released into circulation, into cash registers, into pockets, into jars and drawers and glove compartments. Which brings us back to you, because the odds are small, yes, but they are not zero. And everyone who's ever found a life-changing coin started exactly where you are now, thinking it would never happen to them. So here's what you do. Tonight, take 5 minutes. Grab every nickel you have. Don't rush. Look at the date. 2022. Look for the P. Use a magnifying glass if you have one. Check Jefferson's face. Check Monticello's steps. Feel the coin. Weigh it if you can. Trust your instincts that if something looks wrong, that's when it might be very right. Get it professionally authenticated. Do not clean it. Do not polish it. That alone has destroyed $1 million finds. Let the experts confirm what you might be holding, because history has taught us this lesson over and over again. The biggest discoveries don't come from treasure chests or vaults. They come from ordinary places, in ordinary moments. When someone finally pays attention, that nickel you've ignored for years might not just be change. It might be a turning point. It might be the story you tell for the rest of your life. But hiding in plain sight, mixed in with spare change, forgotten in drawers, jars, and glove compartments all across America, most people would laugh at that idea. A nickel worth millions? 5 cents turning into life-changing money? But history has a way of surprising us. And sometimes the most unbelievable treasures were the most ordinary disguises. In 2008, America was in chaos. The economy was crashing. Families were losing homes. Retirement accounts were shrinking overnight. While everyone was focused on survival, the U.S. Mint was quietly producing millions of Thomas Jefferson Nickels, just like they had for decades. Nothing seemed special. Nothing seemed different. But that's exactly how the greatest coin stories begin. Because hidden among the millions of 2008 mint-marked Jefferson Nickels were a tiny number of coins that should never have existed the way they do. Coins created by mistakes, overlooked details, and microscopic differences that the average person would never notice. Coins that slipped past inspectors during one of the most stressful periods in modern U.S. history. And those mistakes turned 5 cents into nearly $2 million. Here's the part that gives collectors chills. Every legendary coin has a backstory. Some are born during wartime, some during economic collapse. The 2008 Jefferson nickel carries both fear and carelessness in its DNA. The Denver Mint was running at full speed. Machines were stressed. Dies were overused. Quality control was stretched thin. That's when rare errors happen. And when they do, they create coins that aren't just rare, they're impossible to recreate. Some collectors believe the most valuable 2008 Jefferson nickel was discovered completely by accident. A retired factory worker sorting through a roll of nickels from his local bank. No gloves, no magnifying lamp, just curiosity. One coin felt different, looked different. Something didn't sit right. That feeling, that quiet instinct, is what separates life-changing discoveries from coins that stay lost forever. Because this nickel didn't scream value. It whispered it. First, you need to understand what makes this coin special. The 2008 mint-marked Jefferson nickel should look normal at first glance. Thomas Jefferson on the front, Monticello on the back. A small D mint mark to the right of Jefferson's portrait, showing it was struck in Denver. But the million-dollar versions don't follow the rules. Some of these nickels were struck with dramatically misaligned dies. Others showed doubled features so subtle they look like shadows until you tilt the coin just right under light. In some cases, Monticello appears weak or distorted, as if the building is melting into the coin. And then there are the rarest of the rare. A small number of 2008 nickels are believed to have been struck on the wrong metal planchet. Heavier than normal. Slightly different color. A sound that rings differently when dropped. That's not wear. That's not damage. That's destiny. Here's where most people mess up. They assume a valuable coin has to look beautiful. Perfect. Shiny. But many million-dollar coins look rough. Imperfect. Almost ugly. Because their value isn't in beauty. It's in the mistake. A tiny detail missing from Jefferson's eye. A ghost-like doubling in the lettering. A mint mark that looks thicker than it should. These are not things you notice in a hurry. These are things you notice when you slow down. That's why so many of these coins are still undiscovered. People rush. They spend. They ignore. And somewhere, in a kitchen drawer, a single nickel waits. Collectors who understand this coin say the most important step is comparison. Take a normal Jefferson nickel and place it next to your 2008 coin. Look at the spacing of the letters. Look at Jefferson's jawline. Look at Monticello's steps. Any blur, doubling, or uneven strike could be the clue that changes everything. And if the coin feels heavier than it should, don't dismiss it. Weigh it. A fraction of a gram can mean the difference between 5 cents and a coin worth more than $1 million. That phrase sounds crazy, but it's real. $1 million. There are collectors who have searched for decades without ever finding one. And then there are people who stumble across them without even knowing what they're holding. One man reportedly used a rare Jefferson nickel as a card protector in his wallet for years. Another was found taped inside an old envelope marked parking money. These coins don't announce themselves. They hide. That's what makes the story so powerful. This isn't about luck. It's about awareness. Because the moment you know what to look for, your world changes. Every coin becomes a question. Every handful of change becomes a possibility. And suddenly, 5 cents doesn't feel small anymore. If you ever find a 2008 D Jefferson nickel that seems wrong in the slightest way, don't clean it. Don't polish it. Don't assume it's nothing. That single decision could protect or destroy $1 million future. Have it authenticated. Have it weighed. Have it examined by professionals who understand modern mint errors. Because history has already proven something important. The coins that change lives rarely look special to everyone else. They only reveal themselves to the people who pay attention. And somewhere right now, while you're listening to this, a forgotten coin sits in silence. Waiting. Hiding. Worth more than houses, cars, and entire retirements combined. Right there, hiding in plain sight. Mixed in with loose change, gas station nickels, and coins your kids toss on the dresser without a second thought. This is the story of the 2006 P Mint Mark Thomas Jefferson nickel, a coin so ordinary looking that millions of people have spent it without ever realizing what they were holding. I want you to picture a moment. Late at night, the house is quiet. You are going through an old coffee can full of coins you have kept for years. You are not expecting anything special. You are just killing time. And then your fingers pause. Something feels different. The weight, the shine, the details. That small moment of hesitation is how life-changing discoveries begin. The Jefferson nickel has always been the working man's coin. It paid for phone calls, parking meters, soda machines, and morning coffee. It never had the glamour of silver dollars or gold coins. That is exactly why this story is so powerful. Because the most valuable treasures are often disguised as the most ordinary things. In 2006, the United States Mint was transitioning designs and experimenting with production methods following the Westward Journey series. Billions of nickels were struck, but a tiny number left the Philadelphia Mint with characteristics so unusual, so perfect, or so flawed in the right way that collectors decades later would pay a fortune to own one. This is where the mystery begins. Some of these coins were struck with extraordinary precision. Others were struck with dramatic mint errors so rare that even seasoned collectors might only see one in a lifetime. And a very small number exist in a condition so pristine that they defy everything we know about circulation coins. The first thing you need to understand is that value is not about age alone. A 2006 coin does not sound old, but rarity, condition, and error combinations can turn a modern coin into a once-in-a-generation discovery. That is why people dismiss these nickels, and that is why they keep slipping through fingers unnoticed. Now let's slow this down and talk about how to identify one of these potentially life-changing coins. Start with the mint mark. The coin must have a P, indicating it was struck at the Philadelphia Mint. Look just to the right of Jefferson's portrait. That small letter is the first gate. No P, no story. Next, study the surface carefully under good lighting. You are looking for an unusually strong strike. Jefferson's hair should show sharp detail, especially above the ear and along the jawline. The steps of Monticello on the reverse should be clean and distinct. Collectors call this full steps, and it is one of the most important value drivers for modern nickels. Weak steps mean ordinary. Sharp, uninterrupted steps mean potential. Now here is where things get emotional, because this is where people have missed fortunes. Some 2006 P nickels exist with doubled dies. This means parts of the design appear doubled, especially in the lettering, Jefferson's eye, or the date. It is not damage. It is not wear. It is a mistake made during the die creation process. Once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Then there are the off-metal strikes. A handful of 2006 P Jefferson nickels were accidentally struck on the wrong planchets. Some were struck on foreign coin blanks. Some were struck on experimental alloys. These coins look slightly different in color and weight. They feel wrong in the hand, but right to a collector. Those are the coins that auction houses fight over. And then there are the pristine survivors. Coins that somehow avoided circulation entirely. No scratches. No dullness. Full luster like liquid silver rolling across the surface when you tilt it under light. These are graded at the highest levels by professional grading services, and when paired with full steps, they enter a different universe of value. This is where the phrase $1 million stops being a fantasy and starts being a documented reality. Imagine the person who first found one. They did not wake up wealthy. They woke up curious. They looked closer than everyone else. They did not assume they knew what they were holding. That curiosity changed their life. Every 1 to 2 minutes. I want you to remember this. People have already spent coins worth over $1 million because they did not know what to look for. That is not a myth. That is history repeating itself. The backstory of the Jefferson nickel itself adds another layer of meaning. Thomas Jefferson believed deeply in knowledge, observation, and personal responsibility. He would probably smile knowing that a coin bearing his image rewards those who slow down and pay attention. Collectors in their 40s, 50s, and 60s often say the same thing after a discovery. I wish I had looked sooner. I wish I had known what to check. That regret is heavy, but it does not have to be yours if you find a 2006 nickel that matches these characteristics. Do not clean it. Cleaning destroys value instantly. Place it in a soft holder. Get it authenticated by a reputable grading service. This is not a step you skip. This is how ordinary change becomes documented history. Auction records show that rare modern nickels with the right combination of strike quality, errors, and condition have crossed into seven-figure territory. When people hear $1 million, they imagine gold bars and ancient artifacts. They do not imagine a nickel they once used to buy gum. That disconnect is where opportunity lives. Think about how many nickels you have handled in your lifetime. Thousands. Tens of thousands. Now think about how many you truly examined. Probably none. That realization alone should make your heart beat a little faster. The beauty of this hunt is that it does not require expensive equipment. Just light, patience, and a willingness to believe that something extraordinary can exist in something ordinary. People laugh when they hear these stories until they see the auction results, until they see the certified slabs, until they hear about the retiree who paid off his house, or the collector who funded his grandchildren's education, all from a coin dismissed as pocket change. This is not about greed. It is about awareness. It is about understanding that history, mistakes, and perfection sometimes collide in the smallest forms. Somewhere right now, a 2006 Thomas Jefferson nickel is sitting in a drawer, a jar, a wallet, or a forgotten box. It has been there for years, waiting for the right eyes. And if you take nothing else from this story, take this with you. Slow down. Look closer. Trust your curiosity. Because the next time you hear the word $1 million, it might not sound like a dream anymore.